G'day and welcome to the Ball Boys AFL Fantasy Podcast. Today we are reviewing the final bye round, I guess, and going through our bogs and flogs, talking about a new segment, The Best Boys, as well as breaking down all the major news for the week. Let's go!
Just done it from nowhere. Fighting the goal from inside the centre. Shade from the boundary. Dusty. Petty. Petrarca. Oh, wow. How good is that? The legend becomes immortal.
G'day and welcome again to the Ball Boys AFL Fantasy Podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Casey, and you can find me on Twitter at Ball Boys Fantasy, joined, as always, by my good friend Luke. How are you, mate?
Let's go. Bye rounds done.
We're done, the bye rounds.
Done with the bye rounds. And we both went pretty well, actually.
Yeah, we did go pretty well. I had it a bit further down the run sheet, but let's go through it now. Obviously, we don't always talk about our rank and you know how good we are. And
yeah, you can't. We'd be talking all day, wouldn't we? You can't win, but some people don't want you to talk about your own team. And then there's been a couple of comments out there saying,
request our rank permanently on
reveal your rank to us.
So we'll drop it every now and again, but it's a good time at least for a lot of us to sort of reflect and sort of see how we went over the bye round in not only how we are ranked, but also how our team is set up as well. Because I think obviously the great man Selby said, I think that I'm going to butcher this quote, but after the bye rounds, the tide goes out and we'll see who's swimming nude. And if you've been sidewaysing through all the bye rounds, then these next few rounds you'll get found out with.
You're going to be beached as, bro.
Yeah, you're going to be beached as with all your rookies on the field. So hopefully a lot of you have been upgrading as well as getting some good scores. So
remember, we view the whole bye rounds as one big round in terms of what your rank does. And like you said, you want to try and end with a team sort of full of premiums or very close to that. And talk to us about your rank, man, because if I had a rank like that, I'd be gloating every second I could.
Yeah, well, look, it's not as good as where I was ranked last year, but I feel like I'm moving at a better pace. I feel like I'm getting
the trajectory.
The trajectory feels better this time around.
Good on you.
I started the bye rounds at the end of round 11 at 1,270. I'm now at the end of round 15 ranked 361, and I actually improved rank every single bye round, which I was quite surprised about.
Yeah.
I thought there'd be at least one round in there where I'd fall back and then hopefully come back. But every round I've managed to increase rank, even without the big man Errol Goulden in my side and averaging 111 over the last 3 weeks. But yeah, so I managed to basically cut my rank in a third to 361. So hopefully
very impressive.
In striking distance of the hat,
mate. And
what about your rank?
I'm all for you doing well too, because it makes the Ball Boys more credible if at least one of us does, half decent. So
yeah, well, it's still a long way to go. We'll see. I'm trying not to get ahead of myself.
No, I was happy with mine as well. I started the season just absolutely woefully, and
this was your nemesis last year. This is where you came unstuck.
Correct. I was the guy swimming naked at the beach. I was beached as. So from the start of the bye rounds, I was ranked around 10,000, just a little less, and I brought that into 4,424 to finish the bye round. So up
over
quite
half
a bit.
your rank.
Yeah. So I'm not anywhere near hat territory, but if I'm sort of setting my sights on, if I could finish the season around 2,000, I'd be just over the moon with that.
That's a good season in my eyes.
We'll see.
It's very competitive this day and age with fantasy, with all these great podcasts and stuff out there. So it's getting harder to get up there. So, but hopefully,
did you just group us in with great podcasts, man? Very generous.
We are, obviously, mate. Listen to those rankings. But so I think, if let us know down in the comments how you went over the bye rank, where you started the buys, what was your rank, and what you are now. Hopefully, we'll see a lot of comments where people have improved no matter sort of where you started. But the other thing we'll check in here is how our team was looking. So before the buys, how many? Well, I think we both had the same amount. So I think we both had 5 rookies / mid prices. So I'm grouping them together with your Warples, your Ashcrofts and all those sort of types. I've left out Sheasel. He wasn't included in this list. But 6 if you included him for both of us. And I think after the bye rounds, before trades, have 1 rookie left. How many do you have?
Yeah, 2 before trades. So hopefully looking to make that just the one.
Yeah.
this week. But yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, so I have the option of having all of my rookies off the field this week, or I could potentially leave one on, and we'll get to that a little bit later. So I think we've both done a good job of upgrading our team as we go along. So
For sure.
let's go into our first segment.
And the winner of the Norm Smith Medal.
You're an embarrassment to what you do, mate. You're an embarrassment.
Couple of embarrassments, couple of bogs throughout the week.
Just
And,
before we get into
yeah.
it, this is one of our favourite segments, but I haven't made a graphic for it yet. I think I need to
Mate, we gotta
get onto that. Yeah, if
I'm sure
anyone,
there's something creative you can do here.
Well,
You've been killing the graphics.
some of our best stuff has come from people who recommend it on
Yes.
YouTube and stuff. So
Yes,
if there's anyone who thinks they've got a really cool graphic that might go
Some
well,
ideas,
yeah, throw them out and I'll see what I can do.
Yeah.
Get my PowerPoint skills to work.
Luke can do anything. He's a wizard on PowerPoint. So
Thank you, Mitchell. Thank you.
Geelong versus Melbourne, first game of the round. Who is our best on ground here, Luke?
The track.
Track.
Yeah, I think the fact that Oliver wasn't named made a few people look elsewhere, and people who went to Petrarca, I think they would have been pleased. He was a little more expensive than some of the other trade-in options this week, with people looking at Crouch, looking at Anderson, these kind of guys.
Yep.
But people who went to Petrarca were rewarded with a 120, I think.
Yeah, well, 125. He outscored a lot of them, all those kind of guys in that price back. And I
Yeah.
believe he was even getting tags for a lot of the game as well. Maybe not a super hard tag, but they were definitely sort of staying with him at stoppages and kicked a goal. And yeah, looks like a beast. And yeah, he's one of the best players in the AFL still, in my opinion. The flog, I couldn't find many flogs from a fantasy point of view, so I'm just going to give it to Gary Rowan here for knocking out his own teammate.
You can't
Jeremy
knock out your
Cameron.
own teammate.
Some people are calling for the suspension.
Yeah, well, how many weeks is he getting? What do you reckon?
None. He hasn't been cited for the FRO, so
Ridiculous.
yeah,
It's
interesting that
It's
obviously
super weird, but because if it was the other team's player, he'd argue, "Oh, my intention was not to knock
he
him out."
didn't mean
well,
to do it.
Same as knocking out your own teammate.
Exactly. Like they haven't cared about intent up until this point.
If the AFL's serious about protecting the head, they've got to suspend him.
Look, I think you don't suspend him, but it just seems like a
It's
bit
funny.
ironic. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
So, but anyway, I don't know.
Poor bastard.
Yeah. So yeah, poor Jeremy Cameron, obviously, and Gary Rowan. Look, he seemed to be sad for a moment, but he ended up playing a great game. So it could have
He
been
really
too
did.
upset,
He did a career best game as well.
Yeah,
so,
so
well done.
but flog behaviour for knocking out your teammate. St Kilda versus Brisbane. Lots of fantasy relevant players in this game. Who's
Yeah,
our best on ground?
didn't get a chance to watch this one, but a guy that a lot of people have been looking at as potentially a top 6 defender. I think he staked his claim this round with a 130. Jack Sinclair, he's looking more and more solid with every week, and now I think he's more predominantly in that half-back role, which we like him in.
Well, he actually got a lot of CBAs this round,
Okay.
which was interesting. The
Yeah.
week before he had none, but he was
bit up in the air.
definitely playing behind the ball. I will say, like in general play, he was in and amongst the stoppages, but he was definitely that guy that they were trying to give him the ball to get that run still, off the back of stoppages, off
Yeah.
half back. So he was getting CBAs. I don't know if he had any kick-ins, but he was definitely the guy that they were looking to. Like, he looked really good in this game. As someone who watched it, they were looking for him whenever they possibly could.
He's just a great player now.
he's a great player.
He's got such a weird career trajectory too. Like, he's been in the league for 6 or 7 years. He popped last year, and now he looks like he's a top player at his club. So good on him.
Yeah, best on ground. Good effort there, 130. Flog for this game was the guy who I brought in, who I thought I'd missed the week before, Marcus Windhager.
You weren't alone.
Yeah, I think just disappointing to what we wanted. He had the 42 points. His CBAs dramatically dropped. And, just cash generation stalled a little bit after putting up an 85 with, I think, the highest CBAs of the team last week. His CBAs were well down this past week and played a much lower 73% time on ground. Disappointing effort for Windhager, who didn't make as much cash as we wanted him to, but hopefully he can redeem himself against the Eagles.
It seems like a bit of a hard read over at St Kilda at the moment. You got Windhager, you got Crouch, you got Steele, you got Sinclair. Like, week to week, where are their CBAs at?
Yeah, it is a little bit strange, and obviously, like, the health of Steele might have something to do with it there, but yeah, it is a little bit up and down with a few of their roles, so we'll have to just monitor it these next couple of weeks.
Now,
Sydney versus West Coast.
the bloodbath.
Bloodbath.
Unfortunately for yourself, mate, the best on ground here has to go to Errol Goulden. I think he's given us close enough to a 150, but
This was a hard one.
proper witches hats.
Oh, Like, man up on the guy, West Coast. Come on, man.
Mitch was calling for a rest.
Oh,
He's like,
he played the whole first quarter, didn't go off. And I was messaging Holmesy, who's a fellow non-Errol Goulden, guy out there just battling away. But it was just painful. That first quarter, I think he had 50 points or more than 50 points, kicked a couple of goals, and they just still let him just run around. That's all good. But yeah, obviously he was a thirsty gangster out there.
He was a thirsty gangster.
Yeah, so a very worthy best on ground if you did have him, which a lot of people do. The flog for this one, I'm just going to give it to the West Coast Eagles. Sort of following on to what I just said. Just come on, guys.
Yeah, it's pretty.
Just a little bit more. Like, we can't be smashed by 170 points. You can't let players like Errol Goulden just run amok uninhibited out there. Take a bit of possession. I don't know. Something's got to change at West Coast. I feel like something will change. Maybe they'll do the old Jack Siebel chip mark around a bit more.
Game plan wise, it's hard to hold players accountable to a game plan when you have no competition for spots coming up through the two. So I think they had like 2 listed players playing their Scoobies over the weekend, and if you're a West Coast player playing in the ones, there's no competition for spots. You got to find another way to hold players accountable.
Look, I don't know what the answer is, but I'm just saying,
tough.
like that, like you get done by 170 points. What was it, the 4th highest margin of victory ever in the AFL?
Pretty tough.
If that's not a flog effort, then I don't know what is by the whole team. So, if you're a West Coast fan, commiserations first of all, but. Let us know in the comments what you guys' thoughts are on your boys and what they can do to potentially be a little bit more competitive moving forward.
Next
Freo
game,
versus Essendon.
Yep, Freo Essendon. We've got Matt Johnson as the bulk. He wasn't necessarily the highest scoring player on the ground, but when you get a guy that's priced at around 400,000 and he gives you as good as 100, that's boggish behaviour. And the other thing too is that
back from last week.
We were watching that one, and that could have been a 110, 115. I think he went off with just a minor injury concern with about 10 minutes to go or something like that. So, and he was on track for plus 100. So
kicked a goal, got 8 marks, 7 tackles, just did everything.
Stat line.
So yeah, he looked really good out there. Not as many CBAs as a couple of weeks ago, but still filling up the stat sheet. Flog for me, and might be someone that we talk about in another segment later, but Hayden Young. How many flogs is this for Hayden Young this season so far?
Well, I mean, we both listen to the traders, and they have that rule that if you give someone the negative threes, you got to get rid of them. Yeah, I mean, we should have traded Hayden Young a long time ago based on that. So look. Hopefully, the guys who listen to this podcast, I know a lot of people traded him in a couple of weeks ago after his round 12 bye. We have been advising. I don't think we ever advocated for it.
That, or maybe not against it, but not recommending it with a lot of confidence. And some people have traded him in, but he is definitely someone who you could potentially now, if you're in that luxury position, you could be looking to move him on because he's just not getting it done. I don't think he's going to be improving much on last year, so he's probably going to be that mid-80s guy, and that's just at this stage of the season not good enough. So Hayden Young. It's been nice. Well, not really, but I think it's time to say goodbye for a lot of teams for you.
This next game, I reckon, was the game of the round. We both got a chance to watch this one. Collingwood
Amazing
and
game.
Adelaide at the G. Just a fantastic game to watch. Now, I'm not actually going to give the bog status to the guy who's went 170, Jordan Dawson, which seems ridiculous. I mean, that bog goes without saying, but the guy that I'm giving it to went, I think, is about 120. But this guy, for a second-year player, is just freakish. You run out of words to describe him. The fact that he's obviously popped a great fantasy score, which is awesome for us. But when he came on with about 10 minutes to go in that last quarter, he would have had at least 9 touches in that last 10 minutes, and all of them were influential touches that got Collingwood moving in the right direction. So Nick Dacos is just a freak, and he will continue to be so for the next 10 years to come, I reckon.
Yeah, he had 10 touches, kicked a goal, laid 3 tackles in that last quarter for 43 fantasy points. So yeah, he's just an all-round gun and moving more and more into the midfield. I think he was the highest CBA attendee for Collingwood this past game. So
there was There was a
Doesn't matter
passage.
where he plays.
There was a passage late. I think it was late in the fourth quarter where Keys wasn't going with him all day, but Keys is like an elite endurance runner, and I remember.
Oh, they were running down the middle.
They were running down the middle, and Dacos was pushing as hard as he could, and Keys was pushing as hard as he could. And Dacos late in the game was just getting away from. He's elite.
Yeah, he's so good.
Yeah.
The flog for this game here, again, it didn't have many people to choose from, so I'm just going to give it to Jordan DeGoey from a couple of weeks ago, being the
So
reason
salty.
why I don't have Tom Mitchell in my team as a guy who potentially could be a top 8 mid.
He's not the reason. You're the reason that you don't have Tom Mitchell.
Well, hold on.
Well, correct.
Yeah, it is. It is me. But Jordan DeGoey gets the flog for enticing me too much with his low break even and cheaper price. When I should have just gone for Tom Mitchell and I would have looked like a genius, but not to be. Gold Coast versus Hawthorn, last game.
Yeah, we didn't really get a chance to watch this one, but we were watching the scores, and Will Day came back and atoned for some poor games in recent history and went 110 plus. So I think people who held on to Will Day would be happy with that.
116, 9 marks, 29 touches, 4 tackles. So for the guys who traded him out, that would have stung a little bit to watch. And for those who held him, it was a nice reward for your patience. The flog for me in this award is Stewie Dew, just for flinging the magnets around. Stewie Dew. He is doing some weird shit at the moment. Fiorini gone from 0% CBAs to 74%. Noah Anderson playing more on the wing, down below 50% CBAs. Not playing our boy, the Humper, in the midfield at all. Absolutely just, stuck him into the forward line.
That's the one I don't get probably the most.
Yeah, just some weird decisions from Stewie Dew, and it's fucking with our fantasy team. So he gets the flog award for this game.
Yeah, well deserved, I think, as well, mate. Well deserved.
All right. Let's talk about the Content Creators Cup, brought to you by Infinite Wealth, where Guesty has given us a really good resource for free for being an AFL Fantasy coach. Go to infinitewealth.com.au/infinite wealth
/AFL Fantasy.
/AFL Fantasy. Good pickup. It's on the screen right there over on YouTube. But how did you go in the Content Creators Cup? You've got a funny story to tell.
Well, I don't. Maybe Popowski can tell us, but I don't know what the chances of this are. 2 draws in a row.
Yeah.
In AFL Fantasy.
Absolutely wild.
When you're scoring 18 players, you know, thousands of points
You've got scores dropping off. You've got captain scores.
To have 2, and there was plenty of uniques in both those matchups.
Yeah.
Just have 2 bang-on draws in a row.
Yeah.
Pretty weird, but that's where I'm sitting with the
so
content
you had the
creators
draw
this
with
week.
the Statesman. I had a bit of a soft matchup this week with Roy, who
wow. Those are fighting words if ever I've heard
I think Roy himself would tell you that he was
undermanned.
He had a tough round this round with
did.
a lot of his players on the bye. So he was always sort of touting this to be his tough round, whereas I think I only had sort of 5 players on the bye that week. So sort of was a bit fortunate for me coming up against him, and he had a few unlucky outs come teams. So bit fortunate for me, but I got the win there and still sitting at the top there, Luke.
You are, mate, sitting pretty.
Yeah, so
that's pretty. You get a bit of pressure on your shoulders if you get to the point where you need to donate thousands of dollars to a charity.
Yeah,
I think you'd think hard about that, mate.
Hopefully I can. Because I think there's a winner for overall and a winner for the matchups as well.
Yeah.
See if I can knock out the double.
We're almost certainly getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah,
but
way too far ahead. Let's move on. So,
bit of news from the weekend.
Yeah, let's do some news. Not too much news in terms of injuries, which is nice, but just a couple of things that I think was noteworthy to sort of monitor moving forward. So the first one is Jack Steele. Now, you didn't watch this game. You said you missed this one.
Yep.
I watched this game, and it was... I tweeted out, it looked to me, and I was cautious of going too early, but it looked to me early on in the game that he was running a lot better. He didn't have any strapping on his knee, number one, and it looked to me like he was moving a lot better than he has the last couple of weeks. There was a couple of times where he sort of sprinted to get open for a mark. I think there was one particular moment which prompted my tweet, was when he sprinted into the defensive 50 to take a mark from a kick in. And that's the fastest I've seen him run in several weeks. So he looked like he was moving better. His scoring was, he turned up, but he still only had 68% time on ground. And I think he is still a little bit rusty.
He's underdone.
Yeah,
he's underdone. The fact that he got to 104, should I say, with 12 tackles.
Yeah.
The Jack Steele of old, if he has 12 tackles,
That's
he's going
150.
140. You know what I mean? So the other thing too, when I was looking through his stats, is his tackles have actually not been too bad for the season. It's the marks that are down, which suggests he's not getting out to space. He's not
So
looking
how many
for
did
those
he have
cheap
that game? How
45s.
many marks did he have?
He only had 3 marks.
Okay,
So the thing that will be very interesting discussion this week, and something that we're going to talk about later as well, is the fact that he's very underpriced.
Yep.
Most people are going to want to give Mills one more week. He plays West Coast this week.
He does.
So this is going to be interesting discussion this week to see whether he is a genuine trade target or not.
Yeah, but it was interesting to see that, to my eye at least, and let me know again in the comments if you disagree, if you still thought he looked a bit hobbled, but to my eye, he did look like he was at least moving and running a bit better. The next one here, like we mentioned before, Mills played his first game back from his injury, but was subbed off at three-quarter time. It was just a management sort of thing. They obviously were smashing West Coast and didn't.
Yeah, I was going to say, that game was tight. It was surprising they subbed him off.
Yeah, but no, obviously, for what he played in terms of game time, scored all right, 64 points. But remember, it was against West Coast, and everyone fantasy points were just up for fun.
Yeah.
So I think he lost like 50 or 60K, and still has a break even of 130-ish.
132, I think it is.
So, but to my eyes, again, he looked like he was moving fine and doing Mills things, getting marks, tackling. So
he's
positive signs, I think.
Give him one more week. We'll talk about him later, but give him one more week and he's an absolute lock. Like, you got to have him, even if he doesn't end up doing proper Mills things for the rest of the season. He's already severely underpriced.
He did play, I think he had like 22% CBAs. He played a bit of wing, also played a bit of forward as well, like rested forward at times. So I think they are obviously just easing him back in with role as well as game time. So, we'll see how that one moves on. The other thing, again, role changes.
Yeah.
Zach Merritt saw a drop in his CBAs down to 59%. With the return of Darcy Parish, who had 81% CBAs in that game. Funnily enough, Stringer was the guy that maintained his CBAs over a Zach Merritt. He played, again, a little bit in the forward line in that game. Still played well and scored okay, but just something to monitor as a guy who's nearly $1 million and touted to be a top 8 mid in the game.
The CBAs are the one that we watch, but week to week they can slightly lie, because if your rotation time occurs when there's multiple goals kicked, that can influence it. Like, that wasn't an overly high-scoring game either, so that means there's less CBAs, and if you just get stuck on the bench, there can be little things like that as well.
He was third in the team, so...
Yeah, I'd be shocked if he's losing that role anytime soon.
Yeah, so not something to sort of jump at shadows, but maybe just something just to tuck in your back pocket and monitor moving forward. So the last couple on the Sunday, again, just wanted to make a note that Ben Keys, we talked about him as a trade target last week, and I traded him in nervously, but he looks like he had the good role midfield and not necessarily clamping in a hard tag kind of a role. So had his highest CBAs of the season at 78%, and obviously scored okay against a tough opponent in Collingwood. So I think that's good news for Ben Keys.
I think it's positive. I mean, if you own him and you're going into that West Coast matchup West Coast?
North.
Am I right? North matchup this week. You'd be pretty happy with that, I think.
Yeah, so interesting to see. And again, we'll talk about our best boys later and discuss him. And the last one here, like we sort of already mentioned, Fiorini had a huge spike in CBA, 74%. Anderson had 48% and was definitely less in the middle in the second half, looking back at the numbers. And also Sam Flanders came in and stole a bit of usage, going 43% in CBAs after coming in from the VFL.
That's the one that shits me the most, is we both traded in Anderson this week, his CBAs dive, and a bloke, Fiorini, who I had fucking 6 weeks ago and he couldn't get a CBA to save his life. Now he's at 74% and goes 115. Like,
part of me wonders if that's like I think they won by 70 points or something in the end, and it was definitely the second half where his CBAs did drop off more than the first half, whether or not it was like, again, Stewie Juice experimenting. He kind of did that the week before when they were getting pumped by 70 points. If he's just kind of, moving the magnets around, seeing what's the best way to go, but it is a slight concern.
If I traded in fucking Crouch, I would have won that.
That's
Content creators matchup.
Sorry, mate.
Okay, put your fucking headband on. Let's go chopping block.
Okay, chopping block. It's gonna be harder and harder to talk about the guys that need to be chopped as the season goes on, because we're getting closer and closer to a quote unquote finished team.
Find a way to talk about him because I want to keep bringing up this graphic.
Okay, so I think the easiest chop of the week will be a Bailey Humphrey, who obviously disappointed people who had him still there and sort of wanted to see him out through the buys. What did he get? 36 in the end.
Oh man,
and
he
kicked a goal
saved
to
it
get
in the
there
last
too.
quarter. I think he had 9 going into 3/4 time or something like that.
It was pretty gross. A few free kicks I think he gave away as well. So he's someone who's got a bit of money on his head and will start to lose a bit of cash now as well. So I think you can trade him out and get a good upgrade from there. The rest, again, any rookies or anything like that going down in price or
Yep.
close to their break even, you can trade out. Some of the tougher ones to talk about are players like, maybe a Darcy Wilmot
Yep.
or a Matthew Johnson.
Yep.
Some of those guys who still have more money to make, but they might be the only rookies you have left on your field that have any kind of value on their head that you can get to a premium. So
You can't fall in love with them, but can you? Once you can get to the guy you want to get to, just even if you might have another 50k to make, you got to pull the trigger, don't you?
yeah, I think they're on the chopping block here because I think you can get rid of them. Depending on your team and your situation, it might be worthwhile holding them.
Yeah.
Say, for example, you've got another way to get a Humphrey and someone else up to a premium, then I would probably do your best to hold on to a Matthew Johnson because, the cash is still going to be helpful this time of year. But like we sort of said, hopefully we're getting very close to completed sides. And if you still have a rookie or two on the field, you want to get to those 22 premiums on your field as quickly as possible because you're going to be losing ground to the guys ahead of you that have already, because a lot of teams will have completed their side coming out of the buys.
Something that you flagged with me early this week that I might not have immediately thought of as well is the fact that a lot of people have Sheldrick now. Sheldrick's playing the second game of the round, I think. So looking at your looping options with Sheldrick, and then depending on what he scores, you could be more or less aggressive with your trades. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of early games. Brisbane play early, so perhaps maybe that means that trading a Darcy Wilmot may not be the best thing. It might still be the best thing, but you could maybe have a look at him and loop his score. You could loop, like you said, at Angus Sheldrick with that Sydney matchup. Who do they play? Geelong. So
on the
it's
Friday.
a tougher matchup, but he's been scoring well these last few weeks. So, and he's obviously not someone you're going to be trading with a negative 40-something break even. So you can at least have a look at him, and if he scores well, then that's your license to trade out a Matthew Johnson, despite him having the ability to go up in price more. If it's that last rookie spot, then you're just trying to look for points at this stage is probably more important than cash, I would say.
Yeah, just something to consider because that's not something that everyone will immediately think of. So I think that's worth noting.
Yeah, for sure. The next guy here, I've just highlighted again, Hayden Young. I think he's on the chopping block for a lot of people. If you have him in, you trade him in after his buy, you're suckers like us and you've had him from the start of the year. He seems like he is just a step behind those guys in the 90s in defenders that I think he might be a ticket to get up to some of those big dogs.
So you've flagged a potential option for you this week is taking Hayden Young all the way up to like a Doherty.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the opposite. Can you go down from Hayden Young to like an Elliot Yeo, or is it?
I like that less. I think at this stage of the year, we want to be getting the best players in. Now, you still want to have somewhat of a value mindset, but we're trying now to get the best guys. And again, I've alluded to this best boys. I'm really hyping up the best boys coming up.
Yeah.
But we're going to go through what we think are the best players in each line and the priority to get those guys in. But I would probably, if I'm trading Hayden Young, unless I could get an upgrade on the other end, which you might if you go down to some of these cheaper options, I'd be more trying to get him up to some of the big dogs. And I guess the question I have for myself, and I think a few other people might have this kind of question, is if you've got a Matthew Johnson on your M8 and he's your last rookie on field, and you have like a player like a Hayden Young or someone that you're sick of watching and you can get to like a Doherty or something like that, what do you do first? And I think for me the question there, for example, I can only get a Matthew Johnson to a Callum Mills. That's all the cash I have enough to get to. Or I can get a Hayden Young to a Doherty. I'm at this stage leaning a Hayden Young to a Doherty and then trying to loop that last spot between a Sheldrick, a Matthew Johnson, a Windhager, and hopefully that I can get a decent enough score between one of those players, because I think Mills is still a little bit risky.
So you would only entertain that kind of an option if you only had the one rookie spot left. Because I'm in a slightly different situation with 2 rookie spots left.
Yeah.
You would just recommend for me more of just a downgrade, upgrade, get another premium, and then I might be in that situation kind of next week potentially.
I think so, and because of the fact that I can only get to Mills, it just feels like, especially for a this week play.
Yeah, you can get Mills next week.
Yeah, I might not be able, and it might not even be that much of an upgrade. Like, I might get more of an upgrade on the other side because of what we've seen from Mills and the risk factor there.
Yeah.
So that's specifically for that. If you can get, if you've got more money in the bank than I do, and you can get a Matthew Johnson up to one of those top 8 mids that have a bit more certainty, then I'd probably go there rather than a Hayden Young up, if that makes sense. But I'm open to exploring the opportunity of looping, but for most scenarios, I think getting the rookies off field is still the priority.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well summarised. Now, this Mitch has been alluding to it for a little while now, but this is a new segment. It's essentially just who we think are the best 22 players in fantasy at the minute.
Yeah.
But
a little bit of a twist on it.
And you can see here. We'll talk more about it in a sec.
You're simply the best.
Goosebumps there.
Not many brain cells were used in the making of this title. We've changed Ball Boys Big Boys to Ball Boys Best Boys.
Completely original, mate. What are you talking about?
Correct. And we've got a cool little graphic, so that's just a cherry on top.
I'm pretty happy with the work you've done there, Luke. That's pretty good, mate.
Thank you, mate. Would you have picked 3 different players, or?
Oh no, I think there's some good variety. We've got a mid, we've got a defender, we've got a forward.
Well, that was sort of where I was going. The Rucks lost out. But.
Yeah, well, the Rucks, everyone knows the Rucks. But let's go through. So what I'm going to do now, a little bit different to like your standard rolling 22. I wanted to divide each position up into sort of 3 categories. Your locks, like the players that, in our opinion, sort of are guaranteed. We think they're going to be the best in their line moving forward. The kind of in the mix bracket where there's like that tier below, throw the blanket over. And then we've got maybe some roughies, some guys that are like potentially cheaper or potentially super unique that have an outside shot of, coming home and being that guy.
And I think it's a good way. And throughout us talking about this, we're going to talk about these guys from their potential as trade targets as well. So you won't see the trade targets graphic this episode, but we will be talking about each of these guys from that perspective too.
So let's go through the locks for the defenders.
First.
So, and let me know if you disagree with any of these ones here. I've got Jordan Dawson, Nick Dacos, Sam Doherty, James Sicily once he's back. And then I'm actually going to lock in Jack Sinclair as well.
Going to lock it away?
Yeah.
I think what he did on the weekend probably suggests that he can be called a lock there. I think even if he's not a lock, I'd be advising people to trade him in.
Yeah, he's probably, if he's not a lock, he's the very top of the of the next sort of group there. I think combined with their run moving forward and what I've seen from him in the last few weeks, I think to me he is firming up to be that 5th guy.
So Sicily, barring Sicily, because he's not playing this week, if you don't own one of those, Dawson, Dacos, Doherty, or Sinclair, who's your priority to try and get in?
Well, it's anyone you can. In terms of value of those guys, I think that Nick Dacos is probably actually the most value. He's at 908,000 and Doherty's at 909,000. I think both of those guys have potential to be 110 averaging players, and they're both priced around that 106, 107 mark. Okay. So those two come in with a bit of value. Jordan Dawson is over the $1 million mark, so it's going to be hard to get him in if you haven't already. And Sicily obviously is suspended. Sinclair is probably about what he's going to do moving forward. You're probably paying for what you're going to get. So Dacos and Doherty are probably the 2 big targets for value. And this is, I guess, the question that I'll throw to you and get your thoughts here as well. Do you think at this point, like, if you don't have, say, any of these locks, do you think that we try and square away these locks first, and then after we've got all the locks in our team, start shopping around in the next bracket?
My personal thoughts is I don't know if you can do that, because I don't know if people can, at this stage, straight away generate enough cash to go straight away to those locks. Right. Like, each line, I feel like you have to play around in that value area to then potentially leapfrog up to the locks.
Yep.
Like let's say, for example, this week, a guy that a lot of people might be looking to trade in is Jack Steele.
Yep.
Well, we don't know if Jack Steele's a lock for a top 8 mid anymore, do we?
No.
But a lot of people can't get any higher than Jack Steele. So you trade to Steele and then you think about going to those locks as your next step. And unless, for whatever reason, you are blessed to be able to go straight to the top.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. I think if you can do it, I'm now at the point where I would do that and take value less into accounts because you don't want to be burned by those guys that everyone else has. But it's you want to square those guys away, and then there might be more opportunities later to get some of those, sneaky picks that catapult up into that bottom end of the best 22.
But at the moment, it's you do what you can do, isn't it?
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. Now, in this next sort of category for defenders, we're talking about guys who are in the mix. So I'll rattle them off and then we can talk about them individually if we want. So Tom Stewart, Will Day, Luke Ryan, Harry Sheasel and Caleb Daniel are all guys that we think could potentially take, that sixth, let's say, top defender spot. I think Will Day and Tom Stewart are probably the two most likely.
Yep.
What I want to ask you about Will Day. So he's gone 116 this week. Few people traded him out. This is his run coming up. So he goes Carlton, GWS, then he goes North Melbourne, Richmond, St Kilda.
Pretty good.
And throughout that run where he went poorly, there was a couple of tags in there. There was a couple of tough matchups. Mm-hmm. Is he a guy that you look to trade in if you got off him? If you never had him, do you think he's a guy you look to go to?
I think so, yeah. I mean, he's actually, compared to a lot of these players, one of the cheaper players.
Is he cheaper than Hayden Young at the moment or something like that?
No, not quite. Hayden Young's done himself a bit of disservice and fallen off a little bit. But 769,000,
it's pretty close.
Price at 90. He could potentially be a 95 to 100 averaging player from here on out. So I think there is actually a little bit of value there compared to someone like, for example, Caleb Daniel, who's also in this bracket, who's 883,000. So if you're picking between a couple of those guys, I'd definitely be going Will Day over a Caleb Daniel because of price. I think they're probably going to do similar-ish moving forward.
Will Day's 19 out of, quick math, 23 CBAs on the weekend.
So he's in there at a high rate. I think he's definitely a guy they're going to continue to prioritise developing as one of their young up-and-coming players. So I don't necessarily expect to see a fall-off at any point.
You still have Day, don't you?
Oh, I still have Day, yeah. Do you have him still?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, so I think he's definitely a good player there. What about Tom Stewart? I think you said that you think he's going to be in that mix.
I think he's going to be in that mix, but I think the weird thing with Stewart now is he was such great value. What are we talking?
Ages
4
ago.
or 5, 6 weeks ago. That trading him in now would just, it would just feel like you missed the boat. It wouldn't have a good feeling associated with it. Trading him in now.
I also don't know if we're gonna see that huge ceiling from him that we saw last year.
Yeah, he feels like a guy that if you've got him now, you're going to ride with him because you're going to be there or thereabouts. But he wouldn't be in the crosshairs.
Yeah, and up against Sydney this week, it's a tough matchup for defenders. Then he comes up against North, Essendon, so a couple of good matchups there. So maybe you wait at least one more week before targeting him. But what about a Harry Sheasel and a Luke Ryan? Do you like either of those two as a potential to get in there?
Luke Ryan, for me, I see him as the kind of guy who's like, you need to win a matchup in a league and it's like the last round, or that you need to take a shot to get into the top 100 for a hat, and you trade in Luke Ryan and he gets you there, or he bombs. Like, for me, he's that guy. And then Harry Sheasel, I just don't know how to feel about having traded out a rookie and then bringing back in a rookie. So
look, I guess it feels dirty. Luke Ryan is currently the 6th averaging defender in the comp at the moment.
What's his floor score this year?
That's a good question. Let me have a look. His floor score is 69. But he's only gone below 80 twice. Three times.
It's way better than Hayden Young.
It's way better than Hayden Young. He's had 2 scores over 140 this season. He's had 7 tons on the year. So he's a guy that hits ceiling scores somewhat regularly.
He does. Is he one of those guys where if you had him at the start of the year and you've owned him all year, then hats off to you, but you just don't feel confident in looking at him as a trading target from here? Is that how he feels to you, or?
I don't know. He's actually not super expensive. He's 802,000. I think if you're looking for a bit of a unique play, a guy with ceiling, super low ownership. If you're ranked a bit further back a bit, he could actually be worth a punt.
If you don't have Day or Luke Ryan, who are you going first of those two?
Day to me feels safer.
So Luke Ryan's the hit the 6, as Calvin says.
Yeah, Luke Ryan's hit the 6 because of his ceiling. He's coming up against the Bulldogs this week under the roof, which is a really good matchup.
Yep.
He's scored well against them in the past, so you could get instant reward. Does make me a little bit nervous just because of what he's done in the past, but he seems to command the ball and just loves that cheap shit in the back line. So.
And he does. He's the reason Hayden Young sucks so much.
Fucking Luke
Killing
Ryan.
us.
Anyway, and yeah, Harry Sheasel, he's a very interesting one. I actually traded him out last round, so I think that there's still going to be some volatility moving forward. But if I could guarantee you he's in that defensive line taking kick-ins, then he could be very much in the mix here as well. Let's talk about some roughies. Harry Himmelberg, Elliot Yeo, and Liam Duggan have also thrown in here. 2 really cheap guys, and Liam Duggan, who's a very unique player. This is where if you can't afford some of those big dogs, I think these players here could get close enough and also be very cheap and get you by until you're doing all of those luxury trades in a couple of weeks' time. So, do you have a preference between Himmelberg and Elliot Yeo moving forward?
I think Elliot Yeo scores better, barring injury. Well, let's always just kind of say that as a caveat with Elliot Yeo. I think he scores better barring injury. But there is a little bit of a price difference. I think it's about 100K.
80K, yeah.
Yeah. Look, I'm thinking Elliot Yeo would be the guy to go there instead of Himmelberg.
Yeah. I think he probably has the ceiling over Himmelberg.
We know he's got the role. He's never getting dropped from
There's
that
no one
team.
to drop him for.
And then he's doing that thing where he plays entirely midfield and then says, "You guys are trash. I'm also going to take kickouts."
Yeah, I'm gonna do everything.
yeah. It actually surprised me. Well, actually, let's put it this way. I know that he had 9 points at quarter time, and he went 95, something like that. So that probably gives you some context.
His runs coming up is actually decent. St Kilda, Brisbane, Richmond, Carlton, North.
See, is this like we talked about this a little bit before we threw the headsets on, but this is the kind of pick I should go for because of where I'm ranked. Like, shouldn't I try to?
It's absolutely. Have a go. I mean, I think this is the kind of a guy that if you don't have, much to lose, or if you're trying to get up somewhere cheaply, then he's definitely a guy you can have a look at. It always makes me nervous. So someone in my position, I don't think I'm going to be looking at it.
I don't think you'd be going there.
But if you're,
a shit position like me,
if you're ranked a little bit further back,
I've got nothing to lose, mate.
You're going to have a crack.
Just my whole reputation. There's nothing on the line.
I think you could easily sort of, if you told me in 3 weeks' time, if Elliot Yeo and Sam Doherty were within 5 points of each other, I wouldn't be shocked. I wouldn't be shocked at all. And you can obviously get him for nearly 300K cheaper. So,
I can't soak it up if he gets injured. But
you have to always acknowledge that there is going to be risk in terms of his body getting injured, and also the Eagles just throwing the magnets around and experimenting. But
so Yo's
he's put up the scores recently. And
and against what I would say is decent opposition, Collingwood, Adelaide, and then 170-point flogging against Sydney, and he's gone average 95 in those games.
Yep. No, I think he
comes up against the juiciest matchup in St Kilda this week.
I can't say he's best top 6, but I think that for stretches he could definitely get close enough and match it with those guys.
Okay, should we talk mids? Otherwise, we're never going to leave.
Yeah, let's talk mids. So again, locks. I've got Rory Laird.
Yep.
I've got Clayton Oliver when he's back. Hopefully that's this week.
Tick.
Andrew Brayshaw, Marcus Bontempelli, and I ummed and ahed about this one, but I've got Zach Merritt in there as well. I think he probably is a top 8.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. He was their highest scorer even with the less CBAs this week just gone, so I think he's a gun.
So I think Clayton Oliver's the interesting one here, who I don't think anyone owns just yet. I think for me, I still want to be waiting a week, maybe 2 weeks to see how he looks coming off, just because it's been so long since he's been back in now. And the fact that there was some talk about him doing his hamstring again, the infection, and and obviously it's going to be much harder to get to him now that we've only got 2 trades. So whilst I was keen to jump on last week, this week I'm now going to give him a week to have a look at him. Would you agree?
I agree with that. Of those 5 guys, if you don't have any, people are going to have at least some of these guys, but if you don't have any of them, where would you go first?
Rory Laird.
Yeah.
Rory Laird for me. He's the highest value. Probably Brayshaw next. Yeah, and the other ones are just very expensive. So, I think Robbie Laird is the guy here. I've got him at number 1. I don't know if I feel as confident with that anymore just because of Dawson maybe taking some points off him. But, I think his floor is the highest, and he's obviously, I think, the cheapest of this lot. Let's talk about the in the mix range, and there's a bunch of players here that we can look at.
Yep.
I'll go through some names. Caleb Sarong, Tom Green, Brad Crouch, Christian Petrarca, Noah Anderson, and Tom Mitchell. So you got 6 players in there to round out the last 3 spots. Of this group, who do you like the most moving forward?
Well, I had the choice of trading in Crouch or Anderson last week, and I went Anderson. I know you shouldn't judge it after a week, but Crouch for me, of these guys, Crouch and Petrarca. I think for me, those two, maybe with Petrarca just a little bit higher, but again, he is a little bit more expensive than Crouch. I think 50k, don't quote me off the top of my head, something like that.
Maybe like 30 or 40 now.
And then I've got Tom Green and Sarong, just a notch below those guys, and then maybe Anderson, depending on what happens with that CBA, is kind of hovering there. And then Tom Mitchell, for me, is a bit of a great unknown, but I kind of see him as the last on this particular list.
Yeah, I think if I was to, if you gun to my head, would told me to pick 3 guys to join that other group, I'd probably go Sarong, Tom Green, and Petrarca.
Okay.
Would be my 3, with Crouch, Mitchell, and Anderson sort of a bit behind, but they're obviously in this sort of bunch together as well.
Yep.
I think this is where, if you can get those locks in, you can start to play around with these guys and, seek out matchups and, fixtures and things like that, and sort of play the fixture game with a lot of these guys, because I think in any 2, 3, 4 week stretch, these guys can all outscore each other depending on the matchups.
It's true, yeah. That's a tough one to rank, those guys.
Yeah, it is quite tough. They're obviously all good players, and I think at the end of the year, I don't know how much would separate a lot of these guys, but it will be interesting to see. That might be the difference between you moving up, because obviously you've got to make a call one way or another.
Now, this next group of guys we're going to talk about, the roughies in the midfield in terms of that Ball Boys, Best Boys kind of 22. These are the guys that I've seen already, people floating around as guys that are trade-in targets this week. So the 2 that I've seen really floating around are Callum Mills and Jack Steele.
Yep.
Obviously, a lot of people, I think, will probably wait one more week on Mills. But a guy that I really want to discuss in some detail is Jack Steele.
Yeah, so Jack Steele, look, again, at the start of the year, I had him as my number 1 ranked mid. I started him on my side. It obviously hasn't gone to plan, but the injuries has obviously been an issue so far this year. We also raised the fact that the St Kilda midfield hasn't been scoring insanely high this year compared to the rest of their team, being the number 1 ranked team for fantasy points. The mids, I think, were sort of 4th or 5th last. That was a few weeks ago. I can update that stat later on. But I think I'm still wanting to see another week, personally, if I could. But if you're going to jump on, this might be the round. However, it does make me nervous that coming into a matchup like West Coast, he strikes me as the kind of type that if his body hasn't been right, is he going to be going out guns blazing and trying to rack up the pill and, fill his boots and pad his stats? Or is he going to be the type that kind of lets the other boys roam free and kind of just gets by without doing any further damage to himself? And I lean more towards the latter.
Or even to extend on that, is he going to make the flight to Perth? If he does, is he going to get
subbed out like Callum Mills style?
If there's been all this discussion about his body, and you're playing the West Coast 2s, maybe you're just not even flying him west. I'm pretty sure they play out west, don't they?
I believe so. I think they are flying out west. Yeah, so I'd be very nervous trading in Jack Steele. I'd also be very nervous trading in Callum Mills. I actually, funnily enough, have more confidence with Mills's scoring ability than I do Steele, assuming Mills is in the right role. But in saying that, Mills did only have 22% CBAs, so I still want to see that tick off. And for him to get through a full game before I launch into it. Look, you could jump in and it could work out. The risk reward could potentially be there, but I think in most scenarios, I'm steering away from that. If you can,
so
that would be the way I think about it.
In sort of a similar kind of not quite price bracket, but in a similar vein of those roughies for the best 22. Lockie Neal, Josh Kelly, Sam Walsh.
Yeah, I think these guys are they're just not quite there, but we know that the pedigree of these players, I think it's more to do with something would have to change for these guys to be up there. So Sam Walsh, he needs to be consistently inside those CBAs so he can get those tackles and be that 110 guy. Same with Josh Kelly. We've seen him more on a wing since coming back from his injury. And Lockie Neal, you've always got the threat of a tag. I think he can match it with the guys above, and he's the most confident I am in this group. But he's always a guy that opposition are potentially tagging and sort of being aware of. So that kind of sometimes limits his ceiling. But if he gets a good run of fixtures, he could probably match the guys in the tier above, in my opinion.
Now, in terms of the rucks, it's
Tim English, Ryan Marshall.
There's not really much to discuss,
All right,
is
let's
there?
move on. Cool. Well, just before we move on from the rucks, if you are someone that has, for example, like a Briggsy, and you held him through his bye round, and he's on your ruck line instead of like a Tim English, for example, how urgent do you think it is to get him to English?
Pretty urgent, I would have thought.
Reckon?
But I mean, he was in those last sort of 3 or 4 weeks prior to leading up to his bye. He was probably averaging just under 100, wasn't he? So perhaps it's not as urgent as I first suggested. Look,
he comes up against Melbourne and then Hawthorn. Funnily enough, Hawthorn is the tough matchup there in terms of scoring. So
isn't that strange?
English, I think, also has a tough matchup against Freo, but last time he versed Freo, he put up like a 130, I think. So.
I think if you still had Briggs, I'd be looking at all my sort of rookie mid prices and kind of playing the break even game there a little bit. Like, where do I most urgently need to go? So let's say you've got like Humphrey or Briggs. You're trading Humphrey first.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
That was just an example that I was kind of using to show where you might.
I would even trade like Hayden Young to
Doherty
before I did a Briggs.
Well, if you think of Hayden Young as what's he been recently, an 80 guy, let's say, and Doherty can be a 110 guy. There's 30 points, whereas Briggs is 100 and
maybe there's like 10, 15 points difference there. That's the probably way I would do it, but probably within the next 2 or 3 weeks, I'd be trying to get in English if you didn't already. Let's move on to the forwards. The locks here, 2 I think are going to be no-brainers. Tim Taranto, Josh Dunkley.
Yep.
I have also put Zach Butters in this list, and I haven't included another player in Errol Goulden. So I've got 3 in the mix there. Zach Butters had a poor round just before his bye, but I still think that he's, since moving into the midfield, he's averaging basically 105, 106. So I think in terms of locks for the forward line, I think he is there because his role seems very conducive to scoring. In the mix range, I've got Errol Goulden. I haven't quite even got him in the locks. Do you disagree with me?
I think Goulden's going to be a top 6 forward at the end.
You think lock it in?
I think so. I think Connor Rosie's going to be pretty close too.
I'm denied about it, and I know I'm obviously jaded and biased, but he's still playing a lot of wing. Now, he's not going to play the Eagles every week.
But who's gonna knock him out is more my question. So like, you've got
a few guys here.
You've got Cornelio. I still don't think Darcy Cameron's averaging more than Goulden for the rest of the season.
Darcy Cameron's averaged 103 over the last 3 games since coming back into the side and playing the majority of their ruck. Like 103 could get it done in terms of a top 6 forward.
Yeah, it could. I guess so.
So I wouldn't put it past it. If you were to, before the season started, say you've got a player who's on the wing, you've got a player who's the number 1 ruck for a team.
Where are you going?
Who scores? What's the better role? Like the number 1 ruck is more times than not better role than a wing. Now Errol Goulden is the best wing in the game, basically, and he does get some CBAs
fantasy wise.
He is sort of he's not a pure winger, but he definitely is playing a lot of wing time, especially with Callum Mills probably elevating in fitness. I think that will continue to trend that way. And his average 107, I think it is, over the last 3 weeks, even with that 145, he's averaging 111. But his average is boosted up by those huge ceiling scores.
They're still part of his average.
I know they are. So it's just about timing those matchups. And I guess like if you can have a few games, so the few games beforehand, he was going, 90, 80, 100, 90, 80, 100, and then a 150, which props him back up. So it's a tough one. I still think he'll be top 6. So I guess I am probably a bit harsh in putting him in the mix.
So also in the mix, you've got Rosie, Cornelio, McRae, Cameron, Keys. Any trade-in targets there potentially this week?
What do we think about Keys?
Well, I liked what I saw in terms of the role this week just gone. So tick
78%.
Tick for that, 78%.
CBAs.
Would I have liked him to score a little bit more than 90? Yes. But does he have an awesome matchup this week? Yes.
Yeah.
Is he probably going to outperform what he's priced at still? Yes.
Yep.
Like, there's a lot of boxes being ticked.
Yeah. Now, he did, I think, 108, I think, in a similar kind of role in years gone past. But
It's not
Dawson's there
exactly.
now.
So it's not going to be the keys that we saw when he did 108.
So if we expect Dawson to be a 110-plus guy,
Yeah.
Laird to be a 110-plus guy.
I expect Keys to be 95 guy in that role for the rest of the season.
95.
And what's he priced at now?
Let me double check. He is priced at
80 or something? 82, 83?
84.
There you go.
So he's probably, about 10 points unders. So he definitely is a guy that you could target and you should get, hopefully, instant reward. There is also a little bit in the back of my mind that he's not concrete locked in that role.
Yeah.
They could still fling him around and do jobs here and there, but I'm less and less worried about that as the games pile up.
Something to consider too. Yes, Keys has good matchup this week, but do we expect that to be a heavy stoppage game because of how bad West Coast are? Sorry, he's got North Melbourne, doesn't he? I keep
North Melbourne.
confusing.
Yeah. Similar concern.
I don't know. Maybe it's not hugely stoppage based, and
I'd probably have him
in that
ahead
case.
of like a Jack McRae, for example.
In that role.
As funny as that sounds.
Jack McRae has been as a DPP forward, he's been sneaky good this year.
Yeah. But yeah, just some interesting forwards there that I think like the Cameron Keys discussion. I think if you're choosing to get those guys instead of like if you don't have an Errol Goulden or you don't have a Butters or a Rosie, I'd probably go in those cheaper guys first
In the forward line?
in the forward line, just
Okay.
because I think they can get close enough to those other guys, and then try and get those other ones later. So yeah, that's probably where I would lean. These roughies in the forward line I don't love as much as some of the other lines, but I've got Bailey Smith in here, Nick Martin, which we haven't spoken about much on the podcast, and my boy Dylan Moore. More so if we just ever see a role change there, that we might want to jump on him.
It's hopeful.
Yeah, these guys are all... Look, Nick Martin, if Errol Goulden's the best winger for fantasy, Nick Martin's probably the next best.
He's pretty good.
But I just still... I can't trust it moving forward.
Yeah, I probably agree on that one.
Yeah, and Bailey Smith, again, kind of a role watch for him moving forward. But at this current point, I don't think he's going to be a top 6 forward moving forward.
We probably got to change our strategy on the Ball Boys Best Boys, because we said Ball Boys Best Boys and then we basically talked about every player in the competition.
Yeah, well, it's just I don't know.
I
It
think
won't be a weekly reoccurring segment, but it was just good to check in on those top guys.
I think next time we do the Ball Boys Best Boys, we go hard and fast.
Hard and fast.
22.
All right. We'll see how we go. But let us know down in the comments, who are your best boys? Who do you think are the top 6/8 in their line? Drop them down in the comments below. Let's maybe finish up with a few questions that some people have sent in. I'll throw them over to you here, Luke. Zach asks, Raul or Rioli to go first? Who do you think is the priority trade there?
Let me just see what Rioli's been up to.
Raul's price at 800,000 and Rioli is 743. I'd probably
Richmond take on Brisbane, Gold Coast.
Collingwood. I think Raul goes first.
Yeah, I was probably thinking Raul as well. The other thing too is Raul's on a line where you could be giving up 20, 30 points to the actual best in that line. Whereas Rioli, I'm assuming he's your defender.
I think Raul is also going to really struggle against Collingwood in a game where they play.
They like to get it out into
fast,
space.
Open. I think that is the exact opposite of what Matty Raul wants. And his break-even is 130. Rioli is
still 115. So still pretty big. But
so
I
it's
agree.
pretty big, but
Raul.
yeah, I think I'd probably prefer getting off Raul.
And you could get at this point, you could get Raul pretty comfortably up to somebody that would be
it's not
really
much,
nice, like a Crouch or something like that.
So I think Raul would be the first one to go in that instance. There's
agreed.
Zach. Lads asked, he wants to finish off his forwards. Do I go Hobbs to Cogs or Cameron? Let's go, he also added.
Thank you. You're saving quite a bit of cash going to Cameron, are you, from...
I think it's only going to cost him like 20k or something like that from Hobbs. Cogs, we didn't talk about him in the Best Boys, but what do we think about him? 849,000. How much is he going to I think he will outscore Cameron.
I think he will, but right at this moment, I think you're going Cameron because you're saving a little bit of cash that can then be used to get you somewhere next week, maybe.
I think
Have we just been off Cornelio this season? Like, we really haven't talked about it
he
too
hasn't really
much.
gone to a point where he's like been an amazing buy, but he also hasn't smashed it out of the park. He's just kind of doing his 100. He was kind of priced near that at the start of the season, so he's just kind of been doing his thing. So I don't know if there's a great urgency to get him in, but I do think that he's probably going to continue to average about 100.
But that's what we think Cameron's going to average roughly, and they're
Cameron, I think
100k less. So
95 to 100. Yeah. I think it depends what you could do with that savings.
yeah,
If you can do something good with it either this week or next week and you've got a plan, then Cameron, yes, he's
Yeah.
obviously much cheaper, probably going to get close enough.
I reckon Laird's lads will have a plan, and he'll save that 100k, and then he's going to do wonders with it next week.
So
That's my thinking.
if you can do something with that, lads, then we'll go the cheaper option. No rookies left on the field for Jai except for Sheasel. Who scores more this week, Walsh or Doherty? Getting Walsh this week allows me to get Oliver next week, whereas Doc this week means I will only be able to get Walsh next week.
I couldn't get past the first part, the little gloat in there. No rookies on field except Sheasel. Wouldn't that be nice?
Big dog over here. Well done,
Wouldn't that
Jai.
be nice?
Hope you.
So read the rest of the question because I was just caught up in that.
Walsh or Doherty?
Doherty.
I think it's clearly Doherty.
Yeah, just take. We said he's a lock on that
Yeah.
line. Just take it.
I think you get the guy who's guaranteed best in his line.
Yeah,
There's no guarantee Oliver comes back and looks amazing
yeah.
the first week, so I wouldn't be going past Doherty. Just get him what you can.
Yeah, it's an interesting point that we make there because all through the season we've been preaching value, try and find value, but it does kind of, and again, second season, don't know mask from elbow, but it gets to this point where now it's just like try and lock in a guy that you are very confident will be on the top.
I do think so. Yeah, I think especially with those locks, if you don't have them, get them in. So Jai, I'd be going to Doherty straight away. Is Himmelberg a play this week? Worried about the slippery ball. Where do they play? Do they play up north? Let me double check that one. Because that might definitely change some things. TIO Traeger Park.
It's Alice Springs.
That's Alice Springs. Okay, so yeah. Well,
I kicked 5 there one night.
oh, did you?
Yeah, I did, mate.
Good
No
memories.
wobble.
Good memories.
So if the Berg plays as well as yours truly,
The
then
Oddslogs.
you'll be on for a huge fantasy score.
Look, I think he is a play. Maybe you'd go a yo ahead of him though. Would you?
I would. There's still about 100k difference, but I think I'm still going yo there. The role, he's like I said, he's no chance of not playing midfield in that team, and the fact that he's basically running the show down back and in the midfield. But again, it depends ranking. I probably wouldn't go either of those guys if you were ranked in a really great spot. That's probably one where you're really just trying to claw your way back.
Yeah. Look, I think he's a play. Like, say, for example, you're really tight on cash. You can't. That difference in prices.
Would you be happy if he was your upgrade this week, Matt? You kind of wouldn't be, would you?
Not the most. No.
Well, what if you went like, I don't know a scenario where I'd feel good, like Hayden Young down to the Berg and then an upgrade on the other end even doesn't
maybe it's
seem.
a double.
I'd
I'd try to be getting yo if I was this guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's lock in that.
Okay.
Do I go Dawson, Timmy T, Crouch, or Petrarca? Struggling to prioritise primos now that we are off the buys.
Oh, this is a good question to have
This
off
person
the
doesn't
back.
have Timmy T. Oh, I'm sorry, Super Dragons DT. It's been a rough season for you so
Tough
far,
logic.
mate.
Read those names again.
Dawson, Timmy T, Crouch, or Petrarca.
Well, this tests your theory because
is
if
the
you're looking
ultimate
for
test.
value, then it's Crouch and Petrarca. But if you're looking to just go to the top of the line, what's Timmy T priced at? I don't even know anymore.
He's priced at 129. Stop tracking it, but yeah, 129.
1.1 mil.
Yeah, fuck. Jeez, it's going to be a lonely season if you don't have Timmy T. But how are you going to get there? I mean, can you get there?
If he's asking, you must be able to get there.
Well, Super Dragons, I'd be whatever.
Don't sell the house.
Whatever doesn't destroy your team the most
Yeah.
is my answer here. So if you can get to Dawson and Timmy T and you can do that responsibly,
Responsibly.
like, I'd tick off going to those guys,
Give
but
financial advice. You should go work with Guesty.
yeah, shit. No, don't listen to my financial advice, but they're very expensive.
They're very expensive.
I'd be trying to figure out if it's the same guy you're trading out for either, then go to the big dogs. you're going to sleep so much better with those boys in your side. But if you have to trade out a better player to get them, then the actual increase in points won't be as much. So
yeah, try and work out what's the difference in points do you think between the player you're trading out and the player you're trading in.
Yeah, I'll try and work it out that way. Got a few questions here. Himmelberg, good get. Yes, we sort of answered that one. First trade would be Humphrey.
Don't expect him to do what he did last year, but
Yeah, I don't think he will.
there's a caveat on that, I think.
They're not chipping around as much, hey?
I don't think so.
What do you think he can average?
90?
90. So he averaged 100 after moving to defence last year.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be that.
So you reckon
Well, I
90?
just don't get that vibe from the first couple of games.
I don't get
But
that
I haven't
vibe
watched
as well.
Cheetos closely either, but yeah, I'm not getting that
Yeah,
vibe.
I think maybe low 90s might
Yep.
be a reasonable thing to expect. First trade would be Humphrey to Hewitt, so that's a downgrade. Then Young to
Yep.
Doherty. He has one rookie on the field, mix of Johnson, Sheldrick, and Windhager, or Young to Himmelberg and Humphrey to Keys, no rooks on field.
No, the first one.
I think I'm leaning the first one there
First
too.
one,
I'm
yeah.
looking at something similar myself.
Good, get off Humphrey. Break even's gone up, and you're going down to Hewitt, who I don't know, maybe. I was going to say job security, but they don't have anyone to bring in. Like, how do you even know at West Coast?
I think he's going to play.
But the difference between Hayden Young and Doherty on a weekly basis could be 50 points, and that wouldn't even be a stretch. It would have been close to 50 points had Doc popped a 120.
The only thing that I would just caution you here, Sam, is just check your loops and make sure you can loop at least one of those guys between Johnson, Sheldrick, and Windhager. Because I know a lot of people maybe were fixing some red dots in the buy rounds, and you might not have the donut there in the line you need it in. So just double check that. And if you're banking on that one, it is a tougher decision. I still probably might go that one because hopefully if Windhager's named, then you've got a juicy matchup against West Coast.
You do. Give me another one.
Let's go. Is it time to target the big boys? Thinking about Bont this week leaves me broke, so I might get a Mills type for my last upgrade. My midfield after the trades is this. So this gentleman has Merritt, he has Brayshaw, he has Laird. The only other lock in the line that I think he's missing here was the Oliver. So yeah, I think getting in a Bont whilst he's nearly $1 million, it is a lot to pay, but when you know you've got a cheap option like Callum Mills coming down the pipeline, that's what allows me to tick this one off.
This fella thinks he will still be able to get Mills down the pipeline.
And I think it's not that hard because he's going to be mid-600s. It's really quite attainable.
Yeah.
So in that instance, when you've got that backup option of a cheap Mills the week after, I am okay to tick it off because I probably would go Bont first, get another look at Mills, rather than doing it the other order.
Yes,
way around,
I understand. Yeah. I think so too.
Do you
I mean, Bont's break even is 95, and he's every chance to outperform that week to week.
Yeah.
But he popped to 150 a couple of weeks back.
So good right now.
Does Brownlow Bont?
Yeah, I think he's still on track. I think he is still on track. That will do it for the questions. Anything else you wanted to add in for the podcast before we sign off?
Oh, some guy in the comments reckons I'm bald under this hat.
Do you want to prove the people wrong?
No, because he is absolutely right. Smooth as a baby's bottom up here, people.
I had a good chuckle at that comment as well. But
Yeah, and there's some. I think it was like Luke's rocking the Kevin Bartlett.
Yeah.
as a Richmond fan.
Only weirdos wear hats
KB.
indoors.
Do you know who Kevin Bartlett is?
I
I don't reckon you do.
don't.
Google him. Brucey Dool is another one, the flying doormat. Bald on top and had the flowing locks.
Jeez, that's a shocker.
The KB.
That's a shocker.
Mate, he's a Richmond legend.
Legend. Back in
Calls
the day,
himself a Richmond fan.
65 to 83, mate. Fucking hell. Get off. But yeah, I think that will do it for us today, guys. Make sure if you are watching along on YouTube, you give this one a big old thumbs up. Let us know what you thought about the best boys, and make sure chuck down any comments in the section below.
Every other segment, are we just going to go Ball Boys, something boys? Like, is that
Absolutely.
That's all we're doing from now on?
It's a tried and tested formula.
You're simply the best.
Tina, R.I.P.
Simply the best, and that goes for our...
Tina Turner did.
Yes.
Yeah, rip.
Correct.
Sorry, Tina.
That applies to our segment names as well. That will do it for us today, guys. We'll catch you guys on Friday for the live show. All the best. See yous.